What's a horrifying, creepy experience you have lived through? Serious. Story 1. Attention! Serious tag notice. Jokes, puns, and off-topic comments are not permitted. In any comment, parent or child. Parent comments that aren't from the target group will be removed, along with their child replies. Report comments that violate these rules. Posts that have few relevant answers within the first hour, and posts that are not appropriate for the serious tag will be removed. Consider doing an AMA request instead. Thanks for your cooperation and enjoy the discussion. I am a bot, and this action was performed automatically. Please contact the moderators of this subreddit. Message compose, Tor Ask Reddit, if you have any questions or concerns. Story 2. Waking up to a strange man standing over me watching me sleep. I froze and stayed still till he left. I thought it was sleep paralysis until I found a box cutter he left on my kitchen table. Turned out to be a maintenance man for my apartment who got fired. Answer: literal nightmare. I'm so sorry for the fear you must have felt, and then the long time afterwards to start feeling a little more normal and safe again. That box cutter he left, so fudge creepy. Like he was transmitting his plans to you even though he didn't actually do it. ETA, I do think freezing was absolutely the right move. Not in a victims-blaming way, just a huge whoo, obviously. I read a lot of true crime. One thing they do is stand over the person and work up their nerve. If you would have reacted in any way, his adrenaline must have been racing so high that it would have probably set him off to doing what he intended. Story 3. Staying in an old hotel somewhere in Spain, Catalonian mountains, alone, half asleep, I felt someone tickling my ankles, heard female giggling. Being half asleep, I moaned about it and told them to quit it. I woke up in the morning and realized I was alone in a locked room and what? Answer: they're usually harmless. If there is a church nearby, they probably decided to freak you out. This happened to me in Goa. My dad and uncle asked me not to look out of the windows after 1 a.m. at night, and I did as they said. But one night I heard someone kinda yelling, so I looked out of the window and saw some women dressed in clad white with freakishly long hair. I was spooked out, and when I woke up the next day, my dad suspected that I had done exactly what it shouldn't have because I looked horrible, like the blood had been drained out from my face. What happened after is a long story. And I don't want to bore people, because this is actually a series of stories. Story 4. We had a guy who was picking up women in the college town area I lived in and take down them and dumping them down this road I would bike down to get my ex-BF's parents' house I'd visit occasionally. I was walking around college town in broad daylight, and this guy in a beige-looking car pulled over and asked me if I wanted a ride. I kept walking, and I turned down my street to walk back to my house, and he pulled in and tried to cut me off with his car. Immediately, he hops out and tries to grab me, and I started to run. It just so happened someone a little further down that street had gotten pulled over, and I started to scream for the police. He gets in his car and peels off. They caught the guy take down women some time later. It was that very same douchebag. I almost lost my shoot when I seen it on TV. Story 5. I was leaving my friend's place and I hopped on the light rail. I passed by the large Christmas tree lighting in downtown, and I remember thinking I forgot it was that night. It's an event I'm aware of, but have only attended once. Anyway, so I kept going. I get home, walk in the door, pondering if I want to order a pizza, while thinking I turn on the TV and flip to the news where they start telling the story of the arrest of a guy a bit earlier. The news says this guy had been planning to blow up the tree lighting event, but the FBI had set him up with a fake bomb, and luckily he'd never realized it. was a dud. The time he pressed the button was around the same time I was passing by. I felt really creeped out by that for a while. Answer: similar thing happened to me in NYC. There was a guy that wanted to blow up the Federal Reserve Bank in NYC in 2013, and the FBI had caught wind of it and set him up. I was walking from my hotel near Ground Zero to an office building past the reserve, and there were all these cops lined up along the street at 10-foot intervals. As I passed each one, they each looked me in the eye, and I got really creeped out. I had this weird feeling that something was happening, but there was not other activity. No sirens, no groups of police. The news came out later that morning while I was working. Apparently, the guy that was planning it was also staying in the same hotel I was. I feel like I absolutely dodged a bullet. Super weird feeling. Story 6. Was doing WWI archaeological mapping of fighting bunkers body recovery in the Pacific. We were in one cave that was used as a holdout, mapping the area and documenting for the local Gov. My flashlight caught all this glinting, shiny stuff in the cave floor, and I was like, oh darn, that's pretty. What's going on here? I walked closer, and in the dark under my flashlight, I realized it was a fuckload of human teeth that got blown apart and mashed into the mud of the cave floor. Looked down, and I was standing on more teeth and other parts. It's strange how fast something that looks so pretty can turn sad and creepy. I sat for a sec to look around, and it got a lot worse the more I looked. Plenty more to the story, but that's the general idea. That was a wild project, and the things I saw during that one will stay with me for a long time. It's haunting, but in a sad way. Not scary. Just knowing that civilians were in that cave as well when everything blew up with the soldiers that came in and used it as well. The civilians couldn't leave, and the soldiers weren't going to give up alive. Part of the doctrine of that particular fighting force in the Pacific Theater at the time. So many shoes. High heels, picture frames, family heirlooms that folks had taken as they ran for safety. Parts of people were absolutely everywhere in that darn cave. Crazy jerk day at work for sure. Answer: that must have been incredibly difficult to be faced with so many remnants of the past. Knowing so many hopes and dreams for the future ended right there. What happens in situations where large numbers of people died with their belongings? Does the government attempt to excavate and return anything returnable to the family? Or is the mapping part of an answer to what happened to this group of people? I have so many questions. I don't want to be intrusive or put you on the spot. From what you wrote, it seems like that would be an important job thing to do to help reconcile what happened during that time. Story 7. Pet and house sitting. 2 dogs, 2 cats. These friends of mine lived in the middle of nowhere. It is nighttime, and literally, all of them look at the fudge corner and look like they are tracking something that is moving. They all get super aggressive, hissing and rage barking. They all stopped at around the same time. I wanted to get in my car and go home. Not okay. Story 8. On deployment with the Navy, a 19-year-old lookout spotted a dead body in the ocean. So the crew did the decent thing and brought on board, double-bagged it, put it in a freezer, and handed it over to the local authorities at our next port visit. Not to go too far into the gory details, there were enough teeth left to identify it by dental records. Somebody had to clean the wire stretcher that had brought it in. And despite the common acronym for Navy, never again volunteer yourself, I knew another teenager would be assigned that chore unless somebody more mature took it on. So I volunteered. The corpsmen provided PPE and iodine, and I gave it a good scrubbing. Sailors being what they are, 2 rumors ran around the crew that week. Don't eat the peas, because the body had purportedly been stored next to the frozen peas. It wasn't, according to both the corpsmen and the CSs. And There's still skin on that stretcher. This was also untrue. Yet having been the fool who had volunteered for that work, I got ordered to clean the stretcher a second time. Every crude joke imaginable made the rounds, too. What's his name? Bob, etc. Much to the distress of the lookout who had spotted the body and reported it, took her aside to say a few kind words to the effect of, "There's a family that will be able to get closure because of her. She did a good deed." Answer: when my dad was in U.S. Navy, they had a report of a Navy plane crashing into the ocean, and they were sent to retrieve what they could. First thing they saw was luggage, lots of luggage. Everyone thought there had been families aboard. They then got word that it was just a transport plane with just a pilot and co-pilot. They eventually fished out something the medics said was human remains. Dad never said what the something was, just that it wasn't identifiable as human. Story 9. I was playing the game Fear in my room at night with the lights out when I turn around and see what looks like the girl from the game, standing there watching me play. It turned out to be someone visiting my roommates who, for some reason, let themselves into my room and watched me play for who knows how long before I noticed. Answer: back 09. I had a similar experience, but mine was with Dead Space. I started playing it in the evening while the sun was still mostly up, but the game hooked and pulled me in hard. It was a few hours later that I had the presence of mind to get up, stretch my legs, grab some water, etc. As I walked from the living room into the kitchen, adjoining rooms, a door at the top of the stairs to my side opened to backlight what I can only describe as a necromorph's silhouette standing there. Scared the hell out of me. I had no idea my roommate was home. Turns out he'd been napping all afternoon, evening, and this was simply him leaving his room with a pair of socks, one in each hand, dangling like slasher claws. I laughed about it a few moments later, but it definitely took a while to get my heart rate back down. Story 10. Warning, long comment ahead. I went to a sorority formal with a girl I didn't know all that well. My friend was dating a girl in that sorority, and apparently her friend didn't have a date. He begged me to go with her and said we would have fun. So I decided to give it a shot. The formal event was at a hotel resort, and I learned that my date gotten us a room for the night. This was before Uber, and the idea of crashing in a room upstairs, rather than finding a taxi, seemed okay. The girl turned out to be an absolute nightmare. She got sloppy tipsy and was, in a word, embarrassing to be even seen with. I was hoping she would pass out when we went up to the room, but she tried to make out with me, and I told her it wasn't going to happen. She got really upset and disappointed. She said I am a senior, and this is my last formal, and I want to have intimacy. Uma's compelling an argument as that was, I politely declined. I got her to agree to just go to sleep, or so I thought. I don't know how much later it was, but she managed to get my boxers off and somehow got me aroused without waking me up. I eventually woke up with her riding me, and I quickly noticed that I wasn't wearing protection. When I opened my eyes, she was staring right at me. In the creepiest voice imaginable, she said, "See? This isn't so bad, is it?" I panicked. For the record, I do not condone violence against women or anyone if at all possible, but I literally just threw her off of me. One problem was that in my panic, I forgot that the bed was up against the wall. Instead of throwing her to my left, off of the bed onto the floor, I essentially threw her into a wall. I can still hear the sound of her head making contact, and it makes me cringe. It seems crazy that that stands out as the worst memory, but it is. As I started gaining my senses and realizing what was happening, I realized that this didn't look good. Somehow I got lucky. Thank God she wasn't hurt. Maybe the next day she felt it. A brief screaming match then ensued. I noticed that she had raided the minibar and was somehow much drunker than she was before, and that's saying something. I quickly got dressed and got the F out of there. I drove straight home. I don't think I've ever been more sober in my life than I was at that moment. I never saw her again, never told my friend what happened, never told anybody what happened, moved out. Of state a few months later after graduation, and only recently, 25 years later, did I start talking about it. It's not like it messed with me mentally or I suffered PTSD that I am aware of. However, I just somehow blocked it out and truly forgot about it for a long, long time. It was actually on Reddit, where I was reading about how intimacy crimes committed by women against men are hardly ever reported, when that memory became unlocked in my mind, and it all came rushing back. I don't recall her name, and I have no interest in piecing that puzzle back together. In retrospect, I regret not getting tested for STDs. Years later, I did, and I was clean, thank God. Sorry for the long reply, but that was the creepiest thing I've ever experienced, by a long shot. Answer: I'm so sorry you had to go through that. That girl is an awful, disgusting person. It makes me sad that you had to clarify that you don't condone violence against women, because that was self-defense, and honestly, she got off easy, Imo. I'm not wording this well, but I do hope that you don't feel any sort of guilt or the need to rationalize your actions to yourself, because you were more than justified, and I hope you've been able to move past this. It sounds like you have, and I'm really glad she hasn't done more damage to your life. Story 11. My boyfriend had a big window in old bedroom that had like a milky screen on it, almost all the way to the top, that you couldn't see through. But at the top there were maybe 20 centimeters normal window. One day we sat in bed talking late at night. It was really dark outside. I look up and I see a dude outside staring in, with his face maybe an inch away from the window. He was in our garden, and we found out later that he had brought a pot and put it in front of the window and stood on it so he could peek through the uncovered glass at the top of the window. Anyway, I was so shocked that I waved at him and started laughing. Story 12. Someone knocked on door when I was about 19. I stupidly opened door. He forced way in. To make a long story short, he strangled me and left me for dead. I regained consciousness and was physically okay. The creep was caught several months later. Story 13. So one night I woke up to get some water. It was around 1 a.m. As I go to the kitchen, I hear like 10 neighborhood dogs barking. I stood there for like 5 minutes and they don't stop barking. I am creeped out and too scared to look out the window. I finally gather up all the courage left in me and look out the kitchen window to see a hooded figure trying to break in through the backyard gate, which was locked. I literally wanted to scream, but I called 911 while I was hiding in my bedroom, looking out through my bedroom window. By the time the cops came, he had broken my back door. Turns out he was a robber. And thought nobody was in the house because he had been watching my house for like 5 days, and I never left the house or opened the windows. He had a gun and would have Fudge eliminate me if he found out I was there. He had committed 2 takedowns already, and the police were looking for him for like 2 weeks. Story 14. Sleep paralysis, multiple times. It started when I lived alone, and I would hallucinate a stranger approaching the door to my apartment and fiddling with the lock until the door opened. Then a shadowy figure would come in and sit on my bed. The sounds and sensations were so vivid, but I could never get a clear visual. It also happened in the hospital, where I imagined a bunch of doctors surrounding me and talking about like I wasn't conscious. And I've seen my partner next to me in bed take on a demonic expression and whisper threatening things to me. Answer: I just had my first one a month or so ago. I'm sure that it was stress-related because my wife was in the hospital for an extended period of time. I had fallen asleep watching Castlevania, so of course my dream-addled brain thought that a vampire had paralyzed me. I happened to be able to whisper my dog's name as I was trying to will myself to move, and she popped her head around and started licking my hand. Apparently, that was enough to wake my body up. When I told my wife about it, I opened with, "Kira Pants saved me from a vampire last night." It's kinda funny now, but at the time, it was horrifying. Story 15. Warning: graphic content. Before my meds to help control these, I used to get, well, flashbacks. They would be triggered by sound or dreams, nightmares rather. Being a former firefighter, I could smell smoke, burnt skin, and flesh. I'd break out into an instant sweat, get disoriented, and be terrified, even though I had never felt consciously terrified while on assignment. I would dream about calls, some I knew I had been on, and others I had to ask some of the guys about. Turns out that there were entire calls from 25 years ago that I don't even remember. Calls where a backyard burn blew up in a guy's face and the skin on his arms started peeling off. When we arrived, they were hanging off a good 8 like gloves. I can still see the look of terror in his eyes. All of this started after I finished my chemotherapy and radiation treatments in 2012, followed up by a bad rear-end car accident in 2014 with a TBI. Before I sought help for this SAT, things were bad, really bad. Story 16. I can remember 2 incidents that my mom almost choked me to passing because I did something wrong or she was mad at me. I can understand the anger because I had food hidden in my room, was very unhygienic, especially around my period ECT. Now I live with my boyfriend. We have a 6-month-old daughter. And my therapist said that actually 99 of the things I did was because I was depressed, abused, and totally not my fault, because I have never gotten any help. Story 17. I used to work a graveyard shift in retail. Basically, it was a clothing retailer, and when the mall was closed, I would come in and clean the store up, fold the clothes, fasten security tags, etc. I didn't have a car, so my day was me waking up at midnight, walk 2 hours, and get in an hour early to start my shift. Well, the road I took has no gas stations, businesses, or any sort of public place until halfway point at a park. And I suddenly have the problem of my stomach isn't agreeing with what I ate before I left. So I remember the park has a public restroom. Now, this restroom was basically a basin with a drain for the urinal, a low-pressure sink, and a stall. The public restrooms had no door, was just open going in, and a grate making an opening for whatever light coming in, and no lights inside whatsoever. So I use my phone flashlight, go to the stall, lock it, and do my business after turning out the light. A couple minutes pass of me looking at my phone, and I hear loud, heavy boot steps coming into the bathroom. Now I know people make the joke of, "Bet you're glad you were on the toilet, haha." No, I learned fear makes your butt clench faster than a cigar cutter. I hold my breath as I hear these boots walk up to the stall and try the door. Thankfully, me locking it showed. I was about to say occupied when this being grunts and growls and starts rattling that door. I stood up, getting my pants up, quickly getting ready for a brawl, and I yell, "I am armed. If you don't stop, I will open fire." Now, the scary part was, I was bluffing. I had nothing, no knife, no gun, just 2 fists and a load of adrenaline. The next thing I hear is these footsteps tear out like a bat out of hell. I wait a couple moments, tighten my belt, and make like a bat myself, my hands up ready for what there may be. Thankfully, no one was there. I never sprinted so fast to that job, and I never stopped at that park again. Answer: working retail at night is scary. I used to work at a store that sold adult beverage in a big city. I have a lot of stories from working there, and I had lots of creepy encounters, but I remember one encounter with a guy that had some sort of really bad intentions with me. He walked in the store, and immediately you could tell he was tipsy and angry, and everybody noticed. He starts talking to me, and his vibe is so dark that the other customers all abandon their purchases and leave, and my elderly coworker goes to the back of the store because she's scared. So I'm just left with this guy. He tells me he just got in a fight with his girlfriend and that she dumped him. That's when I noticed he's got blood all over him and defensive scratches. I'm like 99 sure he just beat the shoot out of his girlfriend, and he's still mad. He starts asking me personal questions like how old I am and stuff, and he does this weird sort of evil laugh to my responses, and then says I remind him of his GF. I try to keep him talking, but I can tell he's going to attack me, and I'm trapped behind the counter and the wall, and he's blocking the exit. I have my finger on the panic button. Then all of a sudden big group of people walk in. He looks at them, then at me. He grabs a bottle off the shelf and leaves without paying. Story 18. When I was 6, I lived in a house, and there was a train track right behind us. One day, my sister and I were playing in the backyard, and we heard a train about to go past, so we scrambled onto the trampoline to watch it go by. The backyard was built in a